On this episode, I welcome Wendy Jones. Wendy is a coach, an entrepreneur, a mom. She's the founder of BeBetter.life. And we talk about a wide range of topics. I was lucky enough to be invited on her podcast, which is called What I Meant to Say, a while back, and recognized that we connected on a lot of different subjects. So I was really excited to invite her to a conversation on Endurance Minded so we can continue to connect and expand. We kick things off by talking about resilience and the power of resiliency, the importance of resiliency, and a resilient mindset as we work to overcome obstacles. We talk about how when we're in those obstacles, when we're in the middle of stressful and challenging times, how to foster a mindset that is resilient and how we can think about those opportunities through a different lens. I ask Wendy what she thinks about optimism and how she maintains an optimistic mindset amidst all of the challenges that we all inevitably face. And she weighs in with what I think is a really interesting perspective and ultimately set the tone for the rest of our conversation. And one of the things that was really most surprising and I think most impactful is she actually pulled out of me some of my own story. And so I end up sharing about my challenges and struggles and experiences with extreme burnout, with my identity as it relates to work and athleticism, how I think about how I spend my time, how I think about setting up my non-negotiables, how I think about structuring my relationships and my days so that I don't find myself in that place again. And Wendy piggybacks on that and shares some of her own experiences. And we go on to really lean into what does it mean to work hard? What does it mean to do great work and to care about that, but also recognize that there's a finite amount of energy and that what we do in the world, it has to fill us up. Things can't just continue to drain us. And Wendy's perspective on this is really insightful and it was different than mine in a good way. And she taught me a lot in this conversation. So as always, I know I say this time and time again, but it's because I'm passionate about the conversations that I'm having. And I believe in the stories that we're telling and the power of narrative. So I know that I say all the time to sit down, settle in, and listen to this one from start to finish. But this is another one where it is just packed with lots of great insight. Wendy's perspective, how she's overcome her own challenges, her perspective on work, on your identity, how you move through the world. Just really, really great. And honestly, I walked away feeling refreshed, feeling energized, with a new perspective and a new way to think about just how I move through my days. Some of the things that pop up day to day, week to week, again, things we all struggle with, stress, anxiety, anxiousness. So I'm grateful to be able to have this conversation with Wendy. She brings a tremendous amount of value to our audience, and I'm looking forward to all of you settling in and listening to my conversation with Wendy Jones. Wendy, welcome to Endurance Minded. How are you?
I am great. I'm happy to be here, and I love the title of your podcast.
Thanks. Yeah, this has been a long time coming. I was on your podcast a good while ago, and I meant to have you on because I enjoyed our conversation so much on your show, and here we are. So I'm excited. It's been a long time coming. I thought there's lots of great intersections. I love so much of what you do. And when we chatted on your podcast, there was lots of amazing conversations that just kind of flowed naturally. So I'm excited to just let that kind of uncover itself today. But one of the places I do want to start was a quote or is a quote that you have or have said, and I'll read it. And I'd love for you to just weigh in because it's very much in alignment with a lot of the stuff that I talk about, a lot of stuff I think about in terms of how I show up in the world, as well as how I can help others, reach their full potential or impact how they show up in the world as well. So The quote is, resilience is about seeing challenges as stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. It's a mindset that transforms pain into purpose. And I think resiliency is, like I said, one of the things that I think about a lot. And I try to think about it in real time, in the sense that I'm like, is this an opportunity that is like going to make me more resilient, or should I deploy resiliency in this time period? It's something that I find myself like very connected to and thinking about, and how it shows up in my life. So I'd love to just get kind of your perspective. Obviously, those are your words, but what does that mean for you? What role does resiliency play? Just give me some background on like the meaning of that quote.
Yeah, there's a couple different lenses. I love the concept of resilience, and I realized that I was fascinated with it from an early age. When I was a kid, I'd always read books about people that had come through like crazy, harrowing stuff, whether they were true, like novels or true life stories, just like, a kid who got cancer, or an athlete, like a young gymnast that was grinding to get to the top, or whatever those stories. So I've been obsessed with the concept between resilience and human potential, and the relationship there. So, as I got older, I realized that the lenses I look at it through are, our nervous system, and also just the concept that we have to be calm enough to keep going. And so I learned that as I came into my body and learned to train my own nervous system, and took that from sports into the business world, that resilience really happens when we don't look at anything. We can recognize a misstep, but if we don't recognize it as a long-term mistake and just look for the little pivot that's inside that, we really can keep going and hit the next level. And that's something that's been really key to me in entrepreneurship, because, as you know, it's not for the faint of heart. And if you get down on yourself, it really slows you down. But when you have a vision that's bigger than your own, than just for you, I started to just look at okay, well, how do we survive? Like, let's look at this. I made a mistake there, but what did I learn from it? And that's led me to this, to be able to keep growing the BeBetter.life platform, because I've learned a lot, and I'm incredibly resilient today, learning, all the things that I've learned, and the missteps have been just as great as the high points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that, the idea of, or not the idea, but the need to calm down in the face of, or when you need to be resilient. And I think that's a really interesting kind of caveat or nuance, because I think when we're in those time periods, at least in my experience, you have the tendency to double down, right? Like when things are stressful, when you're learning, when you need to be resilient in the face of setback or failure or challenging life experiences or what have you. I've found that for me, one of the most challenging things is to not try to like outwork that situation. And I know that can be personality dependent, but I see that show up in so many people, because you think that, if I could just do more, or if I could just find the answer faster, then I wouldn't have to be in this place anymore. And so let me try to double down, where, to your point, there's a calmness. Like, walk me through what that looks like in practice, because I'm really curious of like how that's deployed.
Yeah, I think there's two things that come to mind there. One is really feeling grounded in the path that you're walking, and staying, even, as things come in and challenges come in, or you realize, like, one day I recorded a podcast and forgot to push record. This was early on. And so, there are things that you come across that you're just like, you want to lose your mind in that moment. And I've learned, somatically, just to ground and breathe, and use, my mindfulness practice that really began as part of me learning how to be a better mom, and, and just enjoy my life more, and just bring that into the entrepreneurial space. So grounding for me is huge. And then the other thing I would say is trusting your own judgment. And it's not so much, I believe in asking for help, but sometimes when you're in those moments where like you made a mistake and the buck stops with you, how do you judge that moment? Don't think about how other people are going to judge that moment, because I've always been an optimistic person, and the older I have gotten, and the more challenge I've encountered, my optimism buoys me if I trust my own judgment, because I will figure out a pivot. I believe in my own resilience. And so that bolsters my optimism. But if I think, oh, what are they going to think of that? Oh my gosh, so and so thinks I'm not smart, or I really screwed that up. It pulls you right out of the moment. And so I've learned like self trust is huge in these moments.
Let's lean into the optimism thing, because I think that I would say traditionally we would tend to get more as kind of the maybe the human experience, or as humans, the trend would be to get more pessimistic as we get older, because you have these experiences and this data that supports these things that have happened to you. And, as you live longer, you have more challenges. And so how does that optimism show? Like, was that always the case for you? Or, I mean, it sounds like something you've obviously worked on, but what's the difference for you, or what's been like the key kind of switch to be more optimistic versus more pessimistic and more jaded? Because that's not something I see very much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just was doing some Google research. I have these thoughts all the time, and I'll just type it in on Google. And I was doing a little research the other day on the difference between jaded and pragmatic, right?
Okay.
So, we go through these things, and you can talk to business people all the time. And I was talking to an Olympic gold medalist the other day, and he said that jaded is, as when we go say we're an entrepreneur and we go pitch our business idea, everybody in the room is going to shoot holes in it. You're the only one that believes in it. And that ability to become jaded because you've been through that situation so many times is there. But if you believe in your vision so much, you'll find the pragmatic course to just keep doing the next right thing. And if that's not the right thing, you trust in your ability to pivot. And my optimism, like I was born an optimist, and I'm grateful for that. But my optimism's become more grounded because I have learned how to pivot. And I tell myself in those moments where if there's a little bit of doubt, if it's not okay right now, it's just not over yet. Like, you'll figure out the solution. So you kind of just have to stay with it and stay present, and the path presents itself.
I love that. If it's not okay right now, it's not over. I love that.
Yeah. There's always more to learn.
Yeah. It makes me think about one of the things that I talk about a lot, and I think about a lot, is this like, that growth is always on the other side of friction. And, when you're in these time periods, again, I find myself, the older I get, being very, I think it's a good thing. Maybe you can check me on this. I'm like I'm going to describe it as present. It's also like hyper awareness, again, of this like real time experience that I'm having, where I'm like, and I think it is because I've had a lot of, specifically challenges specific to like my athletic identity and my identity as an entrepreneur. Like, these are spaces I've been in for pretty much the entirety of my life, my adult life, certainly. And so I'm able to recognize, or I try to recognize these things in real time. And I'm like, okay, this I know what this feels like, and I can recognize that it is hard and it
Yeah.
doesn't maybe feel great. And I have all the feelings around that. I have doubt and I have stress and I have fear and anxiety. But I also can recognize that like that is the critical piece or often the crux before something good happens. Before I'm,
Yes.
you know, the person I want to be, before I learn a skill, meet a new person, do whatever the thing is on the other side. And that makes me think of that. Like if it's not okay, like it's just not over, right?
Yeah.
Which you're just in it. And I think that
Yeah.
the recognition of that has really helped me. Not that I don't have crap days or weeks, or
Right.
again that it like absolves me of the challenges, but the recognition that the challenge is an inherent part of what I'm actively seeking, which is growth, makes it feel better. It makes it the perspective. I can see that and recognize it and be like, well, it's not going to last forever. And I know that because it hasn't lasted forever before. Right.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't know, does that resonate? Like how does that land for you? And
Yeah.
like, what's those
Oh,
experiences for you?
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it just reminds me, and once you have the recognition that struggle is part of attaining the flow state, then you can start to recognize when you're in that place and know that you're about to break through. And
Mm,
as an athlete, and I mean, obviously, athletes find flow often, or we know that feeling because we've been in a sport that we've played for so long that you find these flow states. They're easier to access because your muscle memory on whatever level you're playing is there, right? But as we get into other areas of life, that flow state is still accessible, but you do have to push through the struggle. I felt it in parenting, I felt it in the entrepreneurship space. There's so many places where if once you've recognized that struggle is part of it, it bolsters your resolve to push through.
mm-hmm.
So that's what that reminded me of.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I don't know that I've even thought about it in that with that lens. Like the flow state has like an inherent struggle. I think when we imagine that or we're seeking that, and that's something that we hear and we talk about, and whether it's in business or athletics or it's these days where everything just clicks and it feels great and it's your hard work pays off, but there is like the struggle component still in there. Like those things are like inexorably linked. And I don't know that I've thought about that language of those two things like combined in the same space, but they really have to be.
Yeah, no, do
Yeah.
check out Flow Research Collective, and a lot of the work that Stephen Kotler's done
Mm-hmm.
that flow cycle is perfectly aligned with this concept, like that the struggle is absolutely part of getting there. And
Hmm.
it's something I've told my kids that I have 4 kids and 7 years from top to bottom, and I noticed with the younger ones I would have to say, the older two were ahead of them in sports, and the younger two would look. And I think you look and go, I need to be where they are. And you got to say, hey, they weren't there when they started. But if we're always looking, and the same can be in business or in a classroom, if we're always looking at somebody else, it's like we have to know where we're starting and then learn to push through our own struggle to get to that next level. And measuring that against somebody else is always going to be, for me, it's hindering. I
Yeah,
enjoy
for sure.
competing against myself.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we, because I agree. And I think I see that really as probably the biggest. This is a big statement, but I think it's true in terms of like my experience. I think it's the biggest thing that holds people back is like the comparison trap, right? That it's not worth doing because I'm not where this other person is at, who my perception of that person is that like we should be equal or we're on the same page or at the same stage, and you're just not, right? They've put in more time in their different place, or they have different access to there's all
Yeah.
kinds of things. And this happens I think in, so many areas of our lives, whether it's, this person's relationship looks this way and mine doesn't, or this person is this level of fit and I'm not, and I feel like I'm trying just as hard, or this person's got more money than I do, maybe,
Yeah.
right? This is a whole nother rabbit hole of like perception on,
Yeah.
social media and stuff. But, how do we grapple with that? Because or manage it, or find happiness and satisfaction like where we're at, but still want to strive for more. Because that's a tough
Gosh,
balance.
absolutely. That one occurred to me, that concept of being like content and still pushing, because it's like that concept of being present and enjoying where you are and not always feeling like you've got to grind for that next level, but really wanting to, my whole concept of being better is not doing better, but being better, and letting that really sink into you, being part of who you are, that you just have that desire to be better, and trust that it creates that ripple effect that goes out into the world and makes the world better. So I think the concept and the purpose has to be bigger than yourself, or you will run out. The intrinsic motivation will not stay there if you don't have a concept that's bigger than yourself. And that's something like my dad taught me that from early on. You just, if you're selfish, it gets boring real fast. So, my lens on the next generation, and I love conversations between generations and kind of learning, what we can learn from Generation X, which is me, all the way down to the alphas right now, and what we learned from the baby boomers and the greatest generation. There's so much there in that conversation, and we all have a different lens. And I think that we can all learn something from each other, and that purpose becomes bigger because the world is made up of all these different lenses. And I think, now I'm going down a different rabbit hole, but like, I really think they're trying, when I say they, like the messages that are being sent through, big media are very limiting and labeling. And I think the more conversation we can have between generations, it's really open-minded and allows people to critically think, that we won't get stuck in those places where everyone's labeled and feeling limited and segregated. So a lot of what I want to do is just open up that line of conversation between all these different generations that have different perspectives, and know that it's okay to be different. And then that allows us to create belonging amongst each other, not that we have to fit into a certain segment of, whether it's gender or sexual orientation or all the things that are being race, all the things that are being pushed to segregate us. My purpose comes, I guess, how I tie this back in is I feel this huge driving force to change that message and be. So when I get up and I want to, and I'm tired, and I something like challenges are many in my days, that bigger purpose always pushes me forward. But if it was just about me and getting my coffee and going to the office, like, that wouldn't do it for me. That's just not how I'm wired,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, it makes me think about the real need for community and for like a support network, right? I think we are getting more and more siloed. Certainly in some of the spaces we're talking about in the business space, and even in the athletic environment or ecosystem, there's kind of a heroicism to the, like, silent solo person who is taking on like the weight of the world and does it by themselves. And I think that makes me think about this very real challenge of like being present, being satisfied with where you're at, like recognizing the sum total of your effort, but also having these larger goals and that interplay. And I think one of the things that makes that space where you're at feel more fulfilling and to be able to recognize that is to have people to share it with. right? To have,
Yeah.
you know, whether that's just the buy-in from the people around you, you know, to say like, hey, this is something that matters to me, and they support that in whatever way is necessary, or however they can, and or people that are actually like on that journey with you, whether that's a, you know, a partner, a training uh, partner, you know, a business partner, a team in your, you know,
Yeah.
and that's something that I came to recognize that, unfortunately. I mean, everything happens for a reason, but, you know, I think much later than I would care to, you know, admit. You know, I was very much the like, I'll just do it.
You're the lone
And
wolf. You had the
yeah,
pack on your back. Yeah.
yeah, I did, and I thought that was it, you know. And I don't know. I think for a number of reasons. One being that I didn't have an example of what it could look like to not do that, and so I just thought that that was kind of the path. It never really crossed my mind, but I see now that, like, you know, having that community, having conversations with the people in that community about what support looks like, you know,
Yes.
communicating effectively with them and inviting them into that space. And like, that's like where I spend most of my time. Right. It's like
Yeah.
trying to, I just want to like bring people in. Right. And I don't want
Absolutely.
to be the smartest person or the hardest worker or the right. Like, I don't need those like badges of, they're not badges of honor,
Oh
but I don't
yeah.
need to like wear
No,
those
you're
things.
giving me, yeah, you're giving me chills, because that's like where the real growth lies, I think. For I coined the phrase, forget about type A and find your type B, but not B, like BE. So learning how
Oh,
to
cool.
be yourself will
Mm-hmm.
bring that community in that allows you to flourish, to move and create things that are bigger than yourself. You can't do that on your own. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, you're limited on your own. And if there's anything, that's probably the number one thing I have noticed recording my podcast is when you have these great conversations with people that are rising through the ranks of, you know, sports and life and entrepreneurship and all of these great places, when you ask them about their support network, it's always very grounded and extensive. And oftentimes, you know, there's one person that they will mention that's their rock.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't believe that we go through, you know, life alone, or that we're made to go through life alone. And I think if you try to, you're very, very limited in what you can accomplish for the greater good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's interesting to, I mean, just because, you know, I have the ability to compare both experiences, I'm able to look back and recognize like, oh man, like that was real.
What
Uh,
was the shift? Like what started to create the shift for you?
I've thought about that a lot. It's, I mean, one very like, uh, very flatly, it just wasn't. It didn't work. You know, I was super. Um, I had done a lot of the things that I thought I was like that. I had reached a lot of my goals. You know, like I reached a very high level in sport. Uh, I built successful businesses. You know, exited those businesses. And I was just like, this does not feel very. This doesn't feel very good. You know, it's not what I thought it was going to be. And I love. I've talked about this. On other podcasts, and it's not my phrase. If you're familiar with Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus, Brad Stulberg is the one that coined the phrase. It's called the arrival fallacy, and it's
Oh,
that when you get
interesting.
there, that it's the thing, right?
Yes.
It very much ties in to this, like, to the, you have to be present in the space that you're at right now, because the fact of the matter is that like this is the only thing that you have. When you're there, you're just back to where you're at again, right? Like it's a constant reset, and when you get there, well, there is here, right? And you're
Yes.
faced with the same challenges and the same, and so it was very much that, where I was like, oh, I thought that would be it. And then I thought like, oh, I could be this person, or, oh, now I can like find time for relationships or find time for friends. And I was like, oh, but but I didn't. And I had the same circumstances. I started another business. I still trained hard. I was still doing the same stuff. I was just in a different place. And so, yeah, I just recognized, it took a bit of time, but I was just like, oh, this can't be it. Like, this just isn't working.
So can I ask you another question? I don't want to take over the interview, but
no, take it over.
I like this concept because to me, it's about feeling joy in the moment, right? And yes, I mean, sometimes, I've also said you got to learn to find joy in the mundane. But do you remember feeling joyful at any point, like when you were working, like whether you were training or working, you feel joy in that moment, but maybe it doesn't follow you to that arrival moment, right? So do you remember feeling joy in those places or?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't, I mean, I'm not an unhappy person. But I will say that like I really struggle to like recognize joy when it's happening. Like it's still something that I really have to work on. Even when I feel like I'm in a flow state, when feel like I am connected and I'm present, I'm not good at feeling or giving myself permission to feel like joy. I'm like, oh, there must be, like, I should probably do something else, or this time would be better spent doing something else. It's probably one of my greatest challenges is to recognize and give myself permission to just be stoked about like what's going on right now. And so to your question, I don't know. I honestly, like, I would love to have a better answer. I don't know that I gave it any thought. Like in that, I mean, sure. I mean, yeah, like there were great high spots and moments and experiences I had, and places and times where things were clicking, but I didn't feel differently about those than I did about working all night and the stress and trying to, or whatever I was doing. I'm thinking specifically about business. I've always found like movement has always been a real cornerstone for me. And I have always found joy in the experience of or the experiences that a fit body provides me. But on the work front, it honestly is like a darker experience for sure. And it's something that I've struggled to figure out or find my flow in that. And I have more positive experiences now than I used to, but it's still something that I'm very aware of.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I wonder if it comes with, maturity and experience and, walking the road. But two things in that, like one, you do seem perfect for, endurance that I can see how that type of mindset would set you up well for an endurance, sport race. In entrepreneurship is certainly an endurance race. And you're doing that. But I have you ever burnt out?
Yeah, multiple times. Yeah, crashed and burned a couple times, like to an epic extent. Where I've said, I've said like the very real like I've retired twice, where like I literally couldn't do it anymore. I had to take like real breaks, sold everything I owned, traveled, like pushed it to when I got to that end point, I was totally depleted. I didn't have anything else. And don't do that. It's just, because it wasn't from a place of opportunity. Like that story sounds really sexy. Like I've told people that and they're like, oh, that's great. You guys, like, I'm like, you don't understand why that happened. Like that was me that was a protection mechanism, and like that was the only way that I could keep myself afloat. Like I had buried myself so deeply in specific to work
Yeah.
that I didn't have it to give. Um, and what that really was that like I missed out on. I mean, that was a chunk of time in my life where like I wasn't contributing, and I wasn't making an impact, and I wasn't in alignment with my vision, because I was like rebuilding that. I was
Yeah.
like, I got to get back to baseline before I feel like I can contribute
Well, and it's
meaningfully to the
true,
world.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's like the oxygen mask um, metaphor of when you get to that space, you don't have anything to give to anyone else. And I definitely can relate to that. And it's a scary place to be.
Yeah.
But that, the thing that I noticed is your ability to say that you have experienced that and have come through it, and that maybe there were mistakes or challenges along the way, and just the ability to be real about that. Well, that's I won't say it's completely rare, but there are a lot of people that can't tell that type of a story and say and have come through it. So I do think that that's part of being able to keep going, is to really be able to have that authentic moment where you say, like, yes, I've been through that. I don't want to do it again, and this is what I learned. Right.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. I mean, for me, that's always been the only bad experience is one that you don't learn from, and so I think that those experiences have really informed, what it did. The thing that I'm most grateful for is it forced me to think very hard about what my boundaries are, and to fight to keep those in place, for my mental health, for my physical health, for my health of my relationship with my wife and my friends. Because when I didn't, all those things went away, right? Like
right.
it was, and
Yeah.
it happens so quickly because the really very real fact of the matter, the thing that I've recognized about myself is like, I don't, in the moment, like I don't mind. Like I
Yeah.
love to work,
Mm-hmm.
and I I love to do it. Like I love to push it hard. Like I love,
Yeah.
a great day for me and I'm not saying this like this is not a model for how to like do life, or I'm not saying this to sound like heroic, but a great day for me is like a massive work day with like a really hard training session with like super scheduled. Like I want like massive days, really. Like now I need to rest. I'm not saying like, I prioritize sleep. But I love being full, and I
Yeah.
like that feeling of being pushed. And so it's a very slippery slope, because that quickly leads to like, it doesn't bother me to do that. Like, some people are like, oh, like I'm tired, or I'm like, I want to do these things genuinely. And so
Yeah.
for me to just do that and not do anything else happens, like literally it's a switch. And like within a day, I'm like, nothing else matters. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And so, and I didn't realize that for a long time. I just kind of, it didn't seem that like that sharp of an inflection point, but it
Yeah.
really is. And so so the boundaries, like I have to literally like schedule in stops, and like to go
Yeah.
outside and like take my dog, like, and like exercise, and like I keep all my stuff in my office, like get away from my stuff. Phone goes away at 7 o'clock. Like otherwise, like I'm not eating dinner with my wife. I'm not going out. I'm not seeing anybody. Like I know
Wow.
myself well enough. I won't do it. Um,
How did your
and
life how did your life, once you instituted those boundaries? Like a lot of times people say when you put your boundaries down, there people fall away that can't kind of live around. But like the way you're describing yours, it's the opposite. Like you attracted people into your life or kept those relationships, that you hold near and dear. You kept them with putting your boundaries down.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yes, and my circle did still get smaller, because what it did was it also made me hyper vigilant in what I say yes to and what I say no to.
Amen.
And the very real fact of the matter is that the things that I said no to impacted some people.
Yeah.
And that's not a reflection on their value, but that's still like daily how I have to show up. So
Yeah, that
what's
resonates.
that? Yeah. Like, how's that been? Because I mean, saying, I love the, this is like a pervasive saying, this is not mine, but when you say yes to the wrong thing, you're saying no to the right thing. Right. And
So true.
I love, I mean, it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but I just love that visualization. It's so clear to me that if the wrong thing goes in that slot, there's not space for the right thing. Because I can see, I just described
Yes.
like how I live my life. And it is like there's a spot for everything. And I'm like, oh, I get that. And so like, does that resonate? Like, how does that show up for
It
you
does.
specifically?
It does. And I've contemplated so many of these things, and I love this conversation because I feel like you're coming at it from a very masculine point of view. And the way I have learned to elevate and flourish is by really leaning into the feminine side. Like coming from an athletic background, I know how to push. I know what that feels like. But where I come from now is always trying to build energy. And so I'm building energy in my system, and where my boundaries come in, or when I look at, is this an even energy exchange, or am I gaining? It's not about taking, it's about like, there's just an infinite field of energy. And I can feel when I get in certain situations that's feeding my energy. It's expanding the potential in my field. And it kind of gets into the quantum world, which I've as I've progressed through, personal development, it's led me into the energetic world. And we have this potential to connect with so much in the field. There's infinite potential out there, but we have to have the energy to meet it. And, from that place of burnout, you can't meet the potential that's in your field. Right. I mean, you and I wouldn't have found each other if we weren't on a journey of personal growth. Right. Like, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And so I'm constantly looking for ways to up level my energy. And I can feel it with certain conversations. So if something, I have had a lot of conversations fall away because I used to derive so much worth from being the fixer, being the people pleaser. And you realize over time that's just depleting, and you can't help the world the way that you want to if you aren't, looking for ways to up level your own energy. So I kind of look at it more from an energetic perspective, but I totally relate. My boyfriend, his Google Calendar, I'm like, oh my goodness, like every 5 minutes is like scheduled. And I relate to, loving to work and really liking that space where you're, but I feel like that's a masculine way to come at it. And then I've realized that as I come at it more from my feminine side, I have more energy to accomplish what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the energy side of things more. I was just having this conversation the other day with a friend, and I'm going to describe how I think about it. And then I'd love to hear I think we're on the same page, and I'm not saying that I'm right about this at all. So I'd love to get your take. I feel like for like me, there is kind of a finite amount of energy that like I can give out in the world, and specific to relationships. This was the conversation I was having with a friend. I was like, if I pour out or give energy to the wrong people, or people that aren't in alignment, I don't get that energy back, right? Like there needs to be this reciprocal energy. And this ties into this, like my circle is very small and I'm very purposeful with those relationships for this reason. And I do know that it is also because of what I do for work, which is I'm in a leadership role, and that to me is a support role. And so I am pouring out and pouring into people all day. And so I have to be, again, very purposeful and very mindful of that. So does that jive with how you think about energy, or is there an upgrade there? Like, I'd just love to get your take on like how, because this is, I'm trying, I so hear what you're saying, but truthfully, this is also like a new way to think about things for me. But I do feel it where I'm like, oh, like I don't have it to give, and it's because I've given it out and like I'm not getting it back. So like where does it come from? Like who are the people that I can like, I don't know, it sounds selfish, but
no, not at all. Because I can key off of what you're saying about your daily role in business and being a leader, and that support role that goes into giving of yourself to help other people level up, which is awesome. But there is, I think it's in that, you hear it a lot. It's cliche, and I'm a yoga teacher too. But like the mind, body, spirit connection, right? There's a lot of energy. And I think a lot of times, and we're just in our minds, like the world is so much, we're in our mind, right? And so we think like, I have this finite amount of energy. But like when you go out to work out, you connect with your body. Now you've got a mind body connection going. And I think the energy you get from that, if you didn't work out, like you're up leveling and connecting your mind and your body. And this third piece is the spirit. And that's that intangible. It's really hard in the business world to tap into that. And I think it's becoming more like, if we could find a way, maybe you can help with this, how to communicate how the spirit really affects our energy levels and what we can put out into the world. And whatever that spirit is for you, like just, to me, it's like knowing that there's something bigger than yourself, and it extends out from your body. But it's hard to put that into terms in the business world that doesn't sound so woo-woo. But that part of me definitely feels like it up levels when I'm around certain people. And I connect to that. And the more you are in touch with yourself, the more you'll realize certain relationships are for you and certain ones are not. And sometimes it's difficult to let those fall away. But when we do, it's like not everybody's meant to come all the way along on your journey, right? And some people come in and stay, some people come in and you learn something and they move on, but and knowing when to do that that's really part of being true to yourself and figuring out, because I do think we can level up our energy. Like I do think that there's infinite, that there's infinite amounts of energy that we can tap into, but we have to be ready and available. And I think, you have to have focusing on that mind, body, spirit connection for me is what allows me to, I feel like, expand my field.
Yeah, I love that. I think the spirit piece, I mean, maybe tied into that, and I agree. I think we're seeing more. I mean, even I think in the work that we both do, seeing more of a recognition in the business space that work isn't the only thing that's going to move the needle, right? Like I think we're seeing a lot of people. Certainly, I am, and I'm sure you the same, or have had experiences like I've had. We're like, well, like that didn't really work, or that doesn't really feel that good. And like, yes, I can work, but to what end, right? To this thing that I spend a tremendous amount of time doing. If it doesn't feel good, if I don't find joy in it, then there has to be some other mechanism outside of just work ethic, right? Outside of just the ability to continue to go. And that's a fine trait. I've heard entrepreneurship in particular described as like the ability to put up with setbacks for longer than anyone else would care to put up with them. Right. Like
So true.
it is an
Yeah,
endurance game, right? Like you
it
just have to
is.
stay so much of it. And this extends to anyone I think that's, high achiever in the career spaces. You just kind of have to stay in it long enough to like see the results. And it just is not a short play. And those that stay in it
Yeah.
tend to be successful. And then if not, then that's fine too. But, there's this like foundational piece that it brings me, like makes me think about the spirit, which is just like that connection, even maybe, and this is like at a very baseline level or a very surface kind of version of that. But even just being connected to, like your mission and your vision and your values and like
Yeah.
making decisions from this deeper foundational place and communicating from that place and looking for alignment in how you build a team and how you build these relationships and how you ask for support, like that feels to me like it at least starts to get us a little closer to what you're talking about, and like the spirit piece of just this like deeper something else. Like it
Yep.
can't just be I'm going to go to work and I'm going to work until midnight, I'm going to come home and rinse and repeat. Like
Yeah.
to okay, fine, but to what end? Like there has to be some driver there. And I think how we look for meaning in that work certainly matters. That's been the biggest shift for me, is just like knowing why the hell I do it in the first place. Right. And
Right.
actually like making decisions from a deeper place than just revenue, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Like, or whatever the
Right. No.
KPI of the business is, like
Right.
that's fine, but like that's actually not the driver. That's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. So does that feel like we're starting? I mean, does that like
Oh
scratch the
yeah.
surface a little bit? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And I definitely think the purpose is huge. And then, what my entrepreneurial journey has been so much about, like kind of reverse engineering my limiting beliefs about
Mm-hmm.
myself,
Mm-hmm.
and pushing past. I was terrified of the camera when I started my podcast. I hate doing Instagram reels. I don't like. I'm not a big forward facing person, but you also realize, like, if the message is bigger than you, it's not about you, and then that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to push past some of the things that you're like, well, it's good for me to grow, right? Like, put the
Mm-hmm.
camera, let's try it. Okay, I can do this, and then feeling those little marks of satisfaction that you just overcame something that you needed to. And then where do you grow from there? And that authenticity that comes with overcoming your limiting beliefs, that's been a huge one for me. And
Yeah.
I came up with this framework for my coaching clients. It's called the Shine Framework, because I was afraid to shine. Like, I was
Mm-hmm.
afraid to put myself in front of a camera. So if I can do it, then so can you. And I think a lot of it's hard. I believe in strong women. I believe in strong men. But sometimes, for me, I felt like I loved pushing people forward and being behind the scenes. And yet I still had this feeling inside of me, like I was afraid to be seen, and at the same time knew I needed to be seen. So
Mm-hmm.
shining became, I came up with the framework. So shine means, the S is for self-awareness, the H is for healing, the I is for inspiration, the N is for nourishment, and the E is for empowerment. And so I went through all of those stages. When I looked back over the last 8 to 10 years, I went through all of those stages to uncover deeper layers of my self awareness. And then I healed. Then I began to find inspiration and also be able to inspire others, nourish myself with all kinds of good foods and good people and all the things that we need to do to nourish ourselves. And then you feel empowered, and the world is your oyster. And you look around, and all of a sudden you've got a community. But you really, like, doing the deep dive is absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's the theory of work to live or live to work. And, it's, so you were talking about the revenue, right? It's like, yeah, we have to pay the bills and we have to keep the lights on and all of those things. But if you don't have that deeper sense of alignment with what you're doing, it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the limiting belief thing, going back to, I mean, that's a massive piece of it. I think I use that same language in some of the coaching work that I do, specifically on the business and leadership side. I think we recognize, and from my own story, and it's very much in alignment with yours. It's like, well, this isn't working. Like, why? And that's ultimately like how I built one of my other companies, Impact Initiative, which is like, let's do business from a place of like alignment and try to make it enjoyable, right? And like not build from our limiting belief. And that's ultimately what led to burnout. As I was I was doing from limiting belief. And the shitty thing about your limiting belief is that actually, like, it can serve you for a while, right? Like, it's not immediately wrong. Which is a tricky thing, because you're like, shouldn't this hurt me? And maybe, like eventually, but also there's a lot of people that are just walking around like in their limiting belief, and they're there, right? Like, it actually serves you. And like the recognition of that was massive, because I was just like, oh man, you would think this thing would be instantly negative, but it wouldn't exist if it didn't serve you. Right. And so
it's keeping you safe.
Yeah.
Right?
You get to stay in that space, and it's not your highest and best, but you do keep going. And I think specific to business, like that's a big part of my why for what I do, is like, man, I just don't want anybody else to feel that way. Like, I've been there, and like, I believe in work, and I believe in, I love entrepreneurship. I love high drivers in the career space. But like, if you're going to spend this much time doing it, like, let's make it enjoyable. Like, let's find joy in that process, like you were talking about. Because it takes too much of your life to not, really, like, I just feel like, plain and simple, you're like, it can be better.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I went from an obsession with high performance to sustainable high performance, and all these other pieces came in, right?
Yeah. I think, the sustainability piece is huge, right? I think a lot about the, if you, what's your, I've struggled with, or kind of grappled with, I don't know where I heard this, but the saying was, something to the extent, like, if you can't do it forever, don't do it at all. And I was like, okay. And then I kind of backed off of it. I was like, all right, let me think about that. Is that, like, really? Because there's times when you have to grow. I don't know. Like, that kind of struck me. There's days when that feels, I kind of get the sentiment. Like, I'm extrapolating in context. Sure. They were saying, like, sustainability, right? Like, it's not a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
Don't look for like a 90-day like six pack. Like, how can you build, sustainable wellness so that you feel good and that lasts for your lifetime? Right. But like, what's your initial like gut reaction to that sentiment?
I'm huge on discipline, but I think once you know you have discipline, you can really lean into the evolution of how things transpire, and trust that, you don't have to do the same thing over and over again forever. I think, but starting and taking the leap is, that's a huge part of a path that progresses to greater things. And not, everybody's got a different mindset, and, there's a ton of the world is working in a job that looks the same every single day, and it works for them. And then my hat's off to them, because we need all those people doing a lot of these different jobs. But I don't know. I'm definitely much more of a dynamic. I have a routine, and I do believe in that. Like, some things need to be, set it and forget it. And, health and wellness and those things, as you get older, tend to be routines. But I'm all for the evolution of, what's the next great thing? It's going to, catch my eye and hook my interest.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, well, that kind of cancels out like exploration and cancels out opportunities for new things. Yeah. I'm like, because man, there's a lot of things that I do now that I didn't do 10 years ago. They're in alignment with my values. They're not wholly different in the sense that, like, I engage in a different modality, or I've tried different things at work, or I've done, like, it's not totally out of alignment, but it is different. It's not the same. Or play around with, like, different routine. Like, what I
Yes.
do at 5 a.m. is different, like honestly, like I try to take a beat and like read versus just like,
Yeah.
answer emails first thing in the morning. Right. Like, whatever it is,
Yeah.
like, I think there is opportunity. Yeah, I agree. At first I was like, oh yeah, okay. Like that. Yeah, I get that. Like, that's right. And then I
Well,
thought
and
about it and I sat with it and I was like, yeah.
it reminds me too of, when I going back to the nervous system, I think routine is great until it becomes a crutch. And
Hmm.
sometimes, I know people, like I've worked with people that you really have to work to break that routine that's serving you, but maybe keeping your life smaller than, and you're not getting that feeling of fulfillment that you want, but you have to step out of that routine that's giving you so much comfort. Right. So it's a fine line between, discipline to get all the things done that, take care of, to take care of ourselves. And then also, when you've hit that point where it's become a crutch.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I think, there's like this freedom in discipline, which
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think to an
I love
extent,
that paradigm.
yeah,
Yeah.
is definitely true. Like, I mean, I just described my
Yes.
life. Like, it's very, very disciplined. Um, but not so much. I guess I'm careful that discipline doesn't overshadow opportunity. And that if I, to your point, use discipline to say no to, or like turn my back on something that could be an opportunity just for the sake of discipline and routine. Like, no, like during this time I do X, or like on Tuesdays
Yeah.
I do this, or do,
Yeah.
so I think
Right. I mean,
that's,
I described to you before coming on here. I was like, oh, well, I looked at your calendar. I was like, oh, I usually play volleyball on Tuesday mornings, but I can't this week. Oh, perfect. I'd love to do a podcast. So we were able to do this real quick because, you know where the flex is in your schedule and when things change, and you find other opportunities like that.
mm-hmm,
You know, and the other thing that was a bigger concept that came to me when you said, how disciplined you are, and I was talking about the masculine and the feminine, and I think there's something really, really grounding and safe about men who move through the world the way you're describing. Like
mm,
the females, the feminine is like, our expression can be more, ethereal and supportive and nurturing when we know what's going to show up on the other side. And so,
mm.
my hat's off to you, because I think that creates really strong relationships. And going, my other North Star is generational healing. And I think that when men show up the way that you are showing up, in that disciplined way, it creates a safety in the world that creates better relationships.
Mm. I appreciate you saying that. That's something that I've worked really hard on. I think that there's a massive opportunity currently to kind of define and redefine like what masculinity is. And I think
Yeah.
that that's been um, construed and misconstrued in lots of different directions. And I think
Absolutely.
that, and I'm not saying that I'm the role model of that, but it is something that I do reflect on, and am very purposeful in how I show up, in the
Yeah.
world in that way. And also recognizing that is like a nuanced, that it is nuanced, and that experience
Mhm.
is different for different people. And that
Yeah.
I don't think it is one way. I think it involves, you know, lots of different skill sets, like emotional intelligence and kindness and holding space for others, and recognizing your
Yes.
weaknesses, among some of the other maybe more classical,
Yeah.
aspects of masculinity. So, um, yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because it's something that, yeah,
Yeah. That.
I think we're in a, there again. There's an opportunity there. I think, just for people
Right.
to reflect on what that means for them, and um, to be very meaningful and purposeful about that.
Yeah, all of those things that you described, and I agree. Everybody, we're all individuals, and we have the ability to show up a little bit differently. But all those things you describe create such strong, grounded emotional regulation that no matter how you get to that like that is such an incredible thing to bring to the world, because I just, it feels, it's so topsy turvy out there, and the more that we can learn to, ground and emotionally regulate ourselves, it just makes the world feel like such a safer place.
Yeah, totally. All right. So based on what's the one takeaway, the one closing thought based on our conversation that you want people to leave with?
I like I just said, my North Star is generational healing, and creating these conversations between generations and within our, it's it's a really important thing to me. And I think that we all learn through storytelling. And when we hear the stories of other people, when people are willing to tell them, we disarm each other, and we can learn. And because we all realize, like, nobody's perfect. Everybody's doing the best they can with what they know. And the key is to keep trying to learn more. So that's why I love these conversations. I love doing my podcasts, and I want people to come, visit bebetter.life and see what we have going on over there. We're talking to, parents, coaches, and athletes on one side, and the other, my new venture is called the Healing Home. And I'm just bringing, nervous system regulation and helping people learn how to regulate themselves and heal their own nervous system so they can impact their families and then have that ripple effect out to the world. So yeah, come
Beautiful.
visit us at bebetter.life. And I love this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to connect, Wendy. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Take care.